hand over to Prof. Oliver Fu.
Thanks very much, Niké. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining our third Critical Conversation series for 2025. We are very happy that you dedicated some of your valuable time to attend to today's program. And for those of you who have been part of our Critical Conversations series in the past, you may find this a bit boring, but permit me to tell you a bit about our chair. The South African Research Chair in Cities, Law and Environmental Sustainability, which is known in short or by its acronym as CLES, is a research chair that is situated at the Faculty of Law at the Northwest University in Portugal. And it forms part of the South African Research Chair initiatives of the National Research Foundation of South Africa, the NRF. It was established in 2019 and is an academic institution or an academic research unit that is devoted to legal scholarship and the development of research skills that can be used to solve some of our urban problems in South Africa and beyond. And the chair is host to full-time postdoctoral fellows and many postdoctoral students from South Africa and beyond who are furthering their studies in the intersecting fields of urban law, urban governance, urban development, and environmental sustainability. And I had the privilege of being appointed by the NRF with effect from May this year to serve as chair for the next 5 years. Our aim is to produce and publish relevant research on excellent standard through postgraduate dissertations and theses, through scholarly journal articles and book chapters and books, as well as reports and policy papers, and to actively participate in science engagement with policymakers, government officials, NGOs, and institutions that are devoted to urban development and good urban governance and scholarship in this area generally. The CLES Critical Conversation series was launched in 2019 as a way of reaching out to the broader scientific audience by inviting experts that work in any of the areas of research that we focus on to chat to us about a specific topic which we find relevant, and provides an opportunity for anyone who is interested in the topic under discussion to join us and to participate in the conversation. The conversations are used to take place at the moot court of the Faculty of Law in Portugal. And since we decided to move it online, so we've been having it virtually since 2022. Today's critical conversation deals with a very important theme, that of pollution and the intersection between it and climate change, as well as people. And this is very important in the context of South Africa, given the series of important court judgments that we've had, both in the area of climate change and also in the area of air pollution. We are very privileged that we have with us two very esteemed academics that are going to be talking to us about this issue from the perspective of South Africa and Kenya. We want to thank our speakers, Dr. Niké Wesch and Prof Robert Kibugi, for making time to participate in this series. Without much ado, I'll allow Ms. McClango to introduce our esteemed speakers. And I hope that you will find the engagement very fruitful and be able to participate during the question and answer session, raising your questions and also by commenting on aspects that you found very relevant or interesting in the context of their presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I don't know if I'm visible, but it seems like it's dark in here. I will just switch it off. Thank you so much, Prof. And thank you again, Niké. My name is Lidide, as already mentioned, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest speakers for today's critical conversation titled Pollution, Climate and People, Intersection of Air Quality and Human Wellbeing in South Africa. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from leading experts whose work illuminates the profound ways in which our environment impacts human health and quality of life. Their insight will not only deepen our understanding of these aging challenges, but also inspire dialogue on solutions that can shape a healthier, more sustainable future for South Africa. Before I introduce our first speaker, Dr. Niké Wesch, I should also admit that I might stumble over your surname. Please bear with me. And our first speaker, Dr. Niké Wesch, is a senior lecturer in urban and regional planning at Northwest University, where she also chairs the Climate Change and Air Quality Impacts sub-program within the Unit for Environmental Sciences and Management. Dr. Wesch holds a Bachelor of Science, a Master's, and a PhD in City and Regional Planning from Northwest University. Her research focuses on quality of life, community engagement, nature-based solutions, and climate change adaptation. Her recent publication entitled Policy Visions and Lived Realities Diverge in Pursuit of Urban Quality of Life in Africa offers an insightful exploration of how the disconnect between state planning and community priorities affects urban well-being, an issue that resonates deeply in South Africa. By drawing on grounded theory and community level data, her work highlights how differing interpretation of quality of life are shaped by power dynamics and uneven access to data, factors crucial to understanding how we plan more inclusive and also responsive cities. Our second speaker, Professor Robert Kibugi, joins us from the Faculty of Law at the University of Nairobi, where he serves as an associate professor. He has been an advocate of the High Court of Kenya since 2006, bringing extensive legal expertise and practical experience to our discussion today. Professor Kibugi is a distinguished scholar and a lawyer in climate change law, environmental law, and land governance. His work bridges academia, policy, and practice with extensive experience advising governments across Africa on law and policy frameworks for climate resilience, land use, water governance, biodiversity, and also sustainable development. Among his many contributions, Professor Kibugi led the technical team that developed Kenya's National Climate Change Action Plan of 2023 to 2027. He has also served on the governing board of the IUCN Academy of Environmental Law, and he's a member of the World Commission on Environmental Law, and he is also an editor of the International Yearbook on Soil Law and Policy. We are so honored today to have both of you and Professor Kibugi with us. Their combined expertise offers a rare and a valuable interdisciplinary perspective on how air quality, climate change, and human well-being intersect in shaping the future of sustainable and just cities. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Niké and Professor Robert Kibugi. Our first speaker will be Dr. Niké. And now we'll take the floor shortly. Now, Dr. Wike, the stage is yours, and Professor Kibugi will follow with his presentation shortly after that. Thank you, Dr. Niké. Now the stage is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited for this opportunity, and don't worry, you pronounced my surname correctly. My name is Niké Wesch, and as you've heard, I'm in the Unit for Environmental Sciences and Management here at the Northwest University, and I'll be speaking on the intersection between pollution, climate, and people. So this presentation is based on collaborative work with Professor Pickett and Professor Berger, Mr. Maribane from our unit, and then also Professor Newmarcus from engineering. So I would just like to acknowledge their contribution. Yeah, so climate change is no longer a distant threat. It's a lived reality. We're seeing increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events like heat waves, floods, droughts, storms, and these events don't affect everyone equally. So vulnerable communities, particularly in low-income urban populations in the global south, bear the brunt of these impacts. And there's quite a few research projects that highlights how socio-ecological systems are under pressure and how climate change exacerbates the existing inequalities. So this diagram illustrates how climate change affects multiple dimensions of quality of life. So I'll just briefly unpack it. In terms of physical health, heat-related illnesses, respiratory conditions from poor air quality, and increased allergies affects people's well-being and also their ability to generate income and just live a healthy, happy life, I assume. And then in terms of community health, the rising temperatures and stress can lead to increased aggression, crime, and social instability. So there's quite a few studies that that shows that especially domestic violence increases a lot during these heat waves. Mental health, which is linked to this anxiety, depression, and grief, are common responses to this environmental degradation. And then there's also the access to healthcare, employment, and safe housing are also undermined by climate stresses, and this also depends on ability. So in terms of inequality, that also exacerbates these the ability to cope with these stresses. And then air quality and climate change are deeply intertwined. It's not the same issue, but there's a lot of feedback effects between the two. So urban emissions, for example, from transport industry and household energy use, specifically fossil fuel burning, release particulate matter, which is small particles that, depending on the size, may penetrate people's lungs, and that causes respiratory problems. Along with this PM, we have greenhouse gases like CO2, CH4, and O3 ozone that alter atmospheric composition and influences cloud formation. So this is how the air quality affects the climate. And poor air quality specifically is a leading environmental health risk. It's estimated to be responsible for around 7 million deaths annually. And in South Africa, this risk is amplified by energy poverty and also urban density. So within urban environments, poor air quality is driven by multiple sources, and that I've indicated here on the slide. So households, specifically in global south, lower income areas, there's a lot of fossil fuel burning that is a large contributor. And then industries, waste, transport is also a big one, agriculture. And these sources are all interconnected. And that means that solutions, if we are looking for solutions, we have to look at this problem holistically. So just for interest's sake, in another study that we've done, our source apportionment studies show that residential burning and dust are major contributors to poor air quality. And as you can see here on the figure or the diagrams, it's often more than industry. So this is the reason why this is interesting or relevant is that South Africa's air quality management plans focuses almost exclusively on industrial emissions. So this mismatch between policy focus and a lived reality is critical. So to understand this better, I thought of presenting a case study of research that we've done in Metsimaholo. And specifically then in these in a low-income settlement. So I just want to start before I present the case study with this photo. So this is a scene that's familiar to many South Africans, and you can see the fogginess of the early morning fossil fuel burning in these settlements. And it's not just about energy, but it's also about survival. And I think this just shows the deep injustices in how energy transitions unfold. So a while ago, my husband and I was driving at about, I think it was 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., but I was sleeping because it was very early. But as we drove, I woke up from the smell, and I didn't really understand what it was, but I realized it was the smoke from this early morning fossil fuel burning. And the moment that we've passed the settlement, the smell went away. And aside from the health effects of such, of that amount of pollution, it also contributes to CO2 emissions, which drive temperature increases and then again climate change. So this is just again to illustrate and to highlight the feedback effects between air quality and climate change. So then for this presentation, as I said, I'll go into a case study to show how it looks on the ground in South Africa. So we did an intervention project in Metsimaholo, where we replaced their current stoves, which some of the photos you can see on the left side, with low emission semi-continuous coal stoves. So the reason we didn't change the fuel completely is because we wanted to keep with the way of life of the community. So we didn't want to change everything and introduce a whole new technology which has shown often to fail. So what we did, the chemical engineering department developed the stoves, and then after a lot of lab testing, we implemented it in the households. So there's still emissions, but as I'll show in a bit, it's much less than it is otherwise. So we introduced these stoves in 50 households, and yeah, the goal was not perfection, but progress. So in this transition to clean energy, that's not something that's going to happen overnight. So while we're waiting for the complete transition so that we really do have rely mostly on clean energy, we need some solutions in the interim. So that was our thinking around this project. And here's a a map of where the study is. So you can see there Metsimaholo is next to Oraniaville, and it's located in the Fall Triangle A-shaped priority area. So that's one of South Africa's designated priority areas for equality management. And yeah, so you can see that it's quite isolated. If you look at the roads, maybe it looks a bit closer on the map, but even that provincial road is quite a way in or quite a way out of this area. And yeah, so despite some ongoing initiatives, poor air quality persists in these areas due to socioeconomic challenges, and then again, a heavy reliance on fossil fuels for household energy. So our analysis shows high level of PM10 and PM2.5, which significantly impacts the health. So I don't want to go into detail of the emission results. This is not really my expertise, but what I do want to show is or highlight is the difference in the World Health Organization's guideline. So you can see the WHO guideline is 15, while what we measured in with the original stoves before the intervention was 1,300. So according to the WHO, you're not supposed to be able to live past that 15. But we measured the 1,300, which is significantly higher. You can see that even with the new stove the semi-continuous coal stove, it's still 200, which is still a lot higher than 15, but it's much better than what we originally measured. So it is a significant improvement. But so we concluded the project. It was about 2 or 3 months where we did the measurements and we made sure that people had access to the coal, etc. And then after about a month or two after completion, we went back, and a lot of the stoves was in despair. So it wasn't all of them. Many were working perfectly, very well, but the communities reverted to using wood, coal, and then even waste materials like plastic and tires. So after we found these, we had some interviews to try and see what happened. And why they would be using this, because in our initial interviews before the stove was installed, we did an energy profile check to understand what people are doing, and yeah, so we did not plastic did not come up. Plastic and tires and all these things did not come up during those interviews. Which I think also highlights some of the limitations of even semi-structured interviews. Sometimes when you don't realize something is an option, I think you might miss it. But yeah, so the stoves were not designed for plastic, etc. And it was clogged, it got clogged, and there was a lot of smoke, and it was not ideal. So in these interviews, we asked them again what did they use then, and it was mostly wood. That worked, even though the stoves were designed for coal. The wood worked. But then there was a lot of other things, so plastic, waste, and the reasons that they gave for this change in fuel was in the middle of the month, at the end of the month, they don't have the financial capacity to buy the coal or the wood that they would otherwise use. But it's really cold, so especially Metsimaholo is next to the river, so it gets really, really cold. And they need to warm themselves up. So then anything that they can find or use, they would use to heat up their home. So I think this also talks to fuel availability. So they have access to certain things because of financial restraints, but also, as I showed on the map, Metsimaholo is quite isolated. So in the event that the person, it's a very small community, and there's usually only one person that sells these coal or then wood if it's not available elsewhere or in the natural environment to get. If he's not able to get new stock, then there's also nothing to buy, even if the financial ability is there. And then even these low-income, low emission stoves require resources for upkeep. So even though we were able to give them these stoves, it still requires some sort of upkeep. And yeah, so I think this just highlights that the clean energy transitions must be holistic, and technology alone cannot overcome poverty, inequality, and also social norms. Oh, it seems like my slide isn't showing completely. I'm not sure why. So my apologies for that. So South Africa's constitution guarantees the right to an environment that is not harmful to health and well-being. And this is a legal foundation for air quality governance. And then from there we have NAMAQA, the National Environmental Management Air Quality Act, that operationalizes this right. And it also introduced tools like the priority areas, such as the fault triangle, where this area is. But as I mentioned earlier, this largely focuses on industries, and I think to a large extent forget this this really large sector of contributors to poor air quality. So the enforcement remains uneven, and it is a really complex situation where we have resource constraints, socioeconomic realities that is very far apart within the same municipality. And then there's the complexity of informal energy systems. But air quality is not just a technical issue; it's a justice issue, and it intersects with poverty, inequality, and human rights, because all of this, as I mentioned, this feedback effect has it all links together, and then when we get back to the climate, these are the most vulnerable people to address or adapt to the effects and the impacts of climate change. And yeah, so for clean air and climate resilience, and then a quality of life or a quality life, we need a multi-sector collaboration. So we can't only focus on one part of this complex system of climate, energy, and human well-being where that intersects. We have to have science, law, community voices should all work together to find equitable solutions. This intersection of pollution, climate, and people demands holistic solutions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Niké Wesch, for the insightful presentation. We invite Prof Kibugi to present on a Kenyan perspective for this topic. Thank you.
One second. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Is it?
Yes, Prof, you're audible and we can see your slides.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to listen to the exposition that came before, and I think it presents a useful picture of the continuing tensions in the search for a working balance that we can say is sustainable between economic activity that is necessary for livelihoods, as well as the implications that we face. And I think just in agreeing to that is that, of course, there is that very strong intersection between pollution, climate, and the people. And there is a significant harm that continues because of because of pollution in especially in urban areas, and the continued intersection of economic activities, industrial activities, the continuation of using burning as the technology for dealing with the solid waste, for example. As well as the gas and fine particulate matter from just regular economic activities, including failure in municipal functions, provision of pavements, making it possible for the flow of free dust that contributes to the problem of pollution. And I think in recent years, we're beginning to see rising temperature in urban areas that is then making it more and more complicated for people to deal with respiratory challenges, among others. So it compounds the challenges we go. In the city of Nairobi, the average annual fine particulate matter, based on the statistics that I could find, is about 18 micrograms, which is on an average scale about 4 times the WHO guideline. I think the daily average is slightly higher than that. The daily 24-hour cycle is slightly higher than that, around 20, which makes it rather problematic. And I think there has been breakdowns to even demonstrate the levels of toxicity, particularly because of chemical fumes. Industrial waste, and because also human settlement and other economic activities continue to push back to what was traditional industrial zones, meaning that that's been a big challenge. But waste burning is problematic. So there are parts of the city where this is higher because of the location of the dump sites that are still subject to open burning, which then creates a problem. but also the use of biomass for energy sources. I am, however, very cautious about flagging of biomass a lot, because it then sometimes amounts to punishment of poor families and their only viable source of energy. But disproportionate impact on the pollution from diminishing air quality will affect especially people who live in very poor circumstances. For example, the largest dumps in the country in Nairobi is in what we call the eastern side of the city, which is largely where the lowest income households are found, but also it's in terms of high density population, and also significant people who are relying on that dump site for extraction of value for recycling. And when it is open burning, it is quite terrible in terms of the implications that it has. Transport by far has been a big contributor of municipal level pollution. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, this is about 9.6% of the totals in 2022. There is a projection to reduce this rather significantly by 2027. And again, there is still a challenge with the biomass cooking, especially charcoal in urban households, as well as kerosene, which creates not just municipal level pollution, but even household level pollution and lingering black carbon as a consequence of charcoal and firewood use in residential homes, indicating risks, higher risks of lingering pneumonia and lung infections that may be difficult. And of course, open burning of waste is a contributor to methane and other noxious gases. And the problem with dump sites is that because of failure in segregation, you then have hazardous waste like hospital waste being part of the dump site that is getting burned, and that's part of the challenge. In terms of the policy and legal landscape, the country's climate legislation has made it mandatory to mainstream climate action across various public administration sectors. And as a consequence, for example, there is a Kenya Climate and Health Strategy for the next 5 years, medium-term planning, that now goes on to put a health lens on some of the challenges, including from air pollution and diminishing air quality. So that's a big one, of course, international. There is also the National Climate Change Action Plan, again, also medium term, to implement the climate legislation. And one of the key aspects pegged on this, both to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also to contain especially urban pollution, is on the establishment of electric mobility. And so the highest uptake of electric mobility at the moment is in two-wheelers, both in the form of motorcycles, which motorcycle taxis, we call them border borders, are a big phenomenon in terms of economic activity for transportation and delivery, as well as e-bikes, but also three-wheelers, electric three-wheelers, and as well as the digital hailing taxis. I think here you have Bolt, but dominantly we have Uber and others. And so the moving of electric mobility in that direction, but also in terms of fuel efficiency. I'm aware, for instance, as a consequence of this integration, there is work to develop new fuel emission standard for motor vehicles for internal combustion engines, but also to move diesel engines to the highest global standard at the moment, which is Euro 6, that is adoptable in our part of the world. And this then has knocking off emissions, but also reducing overall pollution. There has been some contention around the air quality regulations because the average regulation, the average in terms of 24-hour cycle and annual limits of, for example, fine particulate pollution particulate matter seems to be way higher than what it should be, but these are also quite detailed, are also coming under review. So what are some of the things that we have seen being done to address these challenges in an urban setting, for example, in the city of Nairobi? One, like I said, is the shift towards electric mobility, which especially in terms of two-wheelers, has had significant implications, but also the emergence of electric buses, public service buses. It is not yet as widespread as would be expected, but the development of a bus rapid transportation corridor will likely help in that. But I think it is worth mentioning that at the moment, then electric buses are being assembled and built locally, not in the sense of original equipment manufacturer like you have in South Africa, but at least with technology license, for example, from BYD of China. Clean cooking with liquefied petroleum gas and improved stoves. And on the latter, again, with improved cooking, this has been a key driver in terms of carbon credits, the use of bioethanol for cooking, and as well as improved reduced emission stoves. I think like some what you indicated, which is helping in terms of reduced consumption of biomass. And bioethanol is a major replacement for kerosene. And bioethanol has received rebates from value-added tax over the last couple of years to enhance uptake and reduce the use of kerosene as a fuel for domestic cooking, and then of course increased uptake of liquefied petroleum gas with removal of value-added tax on the cylinders, but also on the gas. And I forgot to put this here. A year ago, 2 years ago, the National Power Utility was directed by the Electric Power Regulator to go ahead and experiment on an electric cooking power tariff, and to then provide feedback after the pilot to indicate how that electric cooking power tariff works. And this is comparable with the current rebate, which is about 50% less of peak and off-peak charging for electric vehicles. Of course, the main limitation for the accessing to this rebate tariff is that you would have to have a registered charging system because the grid is not yet smart. So this then may delay the general uptake in cooking electric tariff, which could help both in terms of household air quality pollution, but also contribute to emissions. Then there has been widespread adoption of solarization of health facilities, particularly because of as a compensation to deal with an adoption of microwave technology in place of what we call the burning, incineration of waste. So the adoption of microwave technology to deal with waste instead of incineration. Incineration is a cause of pollution, especially in large hospital systems. So that's so those are some of the aspects around that. And of course, in some instances, there are benefits of reduction of uptake for some of the persistent problematic health conditions like asthma and others that come from consistent exposure to household pollution from the health of but also externally from that. And finally, speaking on the question of failure in urban infrastructure that to lose dust and in the is the expansion of non-motorized transportation corridors in terms of pavements and cycling corridors, making it possible for people to walk and cycle, but also reducing the free dust that is flying in the air that contributes to the particulate matter. that is applying. I think let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Kibugi, for the presentation. Without taking much time, I want us to delve into the Q&A session. Ms. Mahlangu, I invite you to facilitate. I'm sure people have burning questions right now.
Thank you for the opportunity, Ms. Manguleni. I am Innocent Madam, and I will be chairing the Q&A session for today. Well, I have a few rules for the Q&A session. The aim of the session is for us to engage with Dr. Wesch and Prof Kibugi based on their insightful presentations. Firstly, we will have different sessions of questions. We will take 4 questions per session. You will state whether your question is directed to Prof Kibugi or Dr. Wesch or to both. Then they will decide whether they will join efforts in answering the question or if one is to answer the question. After taking the questions, we will then give our speakers a chance to answer. Please keep your questions short and brief. And for those joining us online, if you have a question, please raise your hand or type it in the chat box you will recognize. And then as the chair, I will now abuse my power and ask the first question, and then I will take questions and then we'll proceed. We'll give our speakers the chance to answer and then proceed to the next session. Well, I have a question firstly for Dr. Wesch. Dr. Wesch, I wanted to know from the Follow program, I would like to know if you guys have a training program for the community, and do you think maybe a training session would have encouraged behavioral change counseling? Say that if there was people selling the code that they were supposed to use instead of plastics, and if there was financial availability. This is because this is one of my recommendations in my research, training sessions for behavioral change. So yeah, and then for Prof Kibugi, I was very interested in your presentation because I'm currently writing an image sheet. The electric vehicle, the transition is something that I related with. But then my question to you will be, I remember we had our conference here, we had our keynote speaker who mentioned that municipalities basically they are burdened with policies and they are struggling to try and implement them. They are there, but then they are struggling to implement them because of competing priorities. So my question is, how can they balance this competing priorities and the need to protect the environment? Thank you. And then I will now give a chance for questions. I will take questions and then give our speakers a chance to answer. If there is a question, Nancy, you can pose a question.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Mahlangu. For me, I always take an opportunity to, just put a gender focus on each and every topic that we discuss here during the critical conversation. And my question is for Dr. Wesch. How can we ensure that women's and children's experiences, especially as caregivers and primary users of household energy, how can we ensure that their experiences inform air quality policy making? Because you were talking about policies not being responsive to the lived realities of community members. So how can we ensure that their experiences actually inform air quality policy making? I hope that was clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Ness, for the question. Do we have one more question? I think it's, okay. Lawrence, you can pose your question. Dr. Erasmus, please pose your question.
Thank you, Ms. Mahlangu. Thank you to both speakers. I found both your presentations very interesting. especially coming from a lawyer's perspective, where we tend to focus on the law and not so much on the practical effects of the law. My question is just, what can cities do from a governance perspective to actually address indoor air pollution? Because their mandate is air quality, but I think from a regulatory perspective, they can mostly act on outdoor air pollution, but not so much on indoor air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rasmus. I am now gonna pass over to Dr. Wesch to answer the first questions and then pass over to Prof Kibugi. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. So with regards to training, we did do some training. We had a demonstration where we went through it step by step, how to ignite the stove, how to use it. And then we also made a video, which was it was an animated video with a Sesotho voiceover, because the main language in this community is Sesotho. But yeah, so as I said, sometimes you don't anticipate, there's certain things that you don't actually know, like the plastic. So we were just focusing on wood and coal, which was the knowns in the scenario. And even though we did some interviews before, we didn't it didn't occur to us that plastic could be an option for fuel burning. So then the questions, so maybe in future we will try and prompt households to understand if they use that as well. And this is definitely something that in future should be included into the video and the training material. But for this part, we didn't include that in the training material. So I hope that answers your question. And yeah, so to ensure women and children's experience are incorporated into the policies, I also think that's a very interesting topic. And we actually have a PhD student who's looking at this gender just transition from an economics perspective. So yeah, that is quite interesting. I think the way to ensure that the experience is there is through participation, but to make sure that these women's voices are heard. So I mean, in terms of participation, we can do it in a way that ticks the box for the public participation requirement. But we can also reach out to these specific, so we can identify the vulnerable groups, and then definitely include the women and children, and then target them for input into the policies. So and to have work sessions that make sure that all voices are heard. So I think often these public participation sessions are either an online or like a virtual type of thing where people can add their comments, or it's this big public meeting where people can raise some points, but it's not always, I mean, not everyone would be willing to do that. So I think in that sense, if we have focus groups and these World Cafe, these types of methods, I think we can in that way incorporate the experience of women and children. And then in terms of the governance, or what cities can do from a governance perspective for indoor air quality, I think the first thing would be to acknowledge that this indoor air quality is a huge contributor to poor air quality in South Africa, and that it has big health effects. And then to be more open, I mean, the offsets are here and there implemented, but I think offsets is a great opportunity to address this. So if industries pollute, then they should have projects, and this coal stove project is an offset project. So the funding came from Sasol, and they implemented these stoves as a way to reduce air quality within the communities around them. So I mean, there's probably much more or a few more options, but I think offsets is a great opportunity to address this from a policy perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wesch, for the answers. We are all satisfied. And now I'm going to pass over to Prof. Kibugi.
Thank you very much. I think I got two questions. Yeah. The first one was from you about what municipalities could do, looking at the competing priorities. And I think I could think of several, but two. I think one is the fact that the question of pollution is no longer a nuisance. It's a core problem, both whether outdoor, indoor pollution. And perhaps one of the ways to do this is to worry, for instance, about energy efficiency, or even dealing with ambient air quality, for instance, core mandates, integrated core mandates, various departments or within a municipality or local government that are dealing with this, so that it's not, for example, an agenda being driven only by the Department of Environment, because they can't achieve anything. And then they could try to apply the traditional performance management tools, so that it's part of performance contracting across the road. So if you're developing a road infrastructure, how are you avoiding or contributing to that? So, in terms of efficiency, are you using solar street lighting? In terms of pollution, what are you doing? So there is a way. I think the term we normally use is mainstream into core mandates. I think the other one is performance-based budgets, especially in the context of the government resource transfers or decentralized administration. It's quite possible to use either pollution targets or resource efficiency targets in that. I'm not familiar very much in how these work in my country. There is a concept we call conditional grants. So the national government finds money, has a budget line that is meant to achieve a specific purpose by a local government. And if they must use that money for that, and they wouldn't get an approval to spend it. So that's also a tool that could be used. And then there was a question, and I hope that's helpful. There's a question from Lawrence about what cities could do from a governance perspective to address indoor air pollution. And I agree, it's a tough one because there's only so much you can do from the use of regulatory tools to contain what happens. You can't quite make it unlawful to cook using firewood, or to cook using charcoal, or to use a paraffin lamp or a tin lamp in a house, because that would be punishing for being poor, so to speak. But from a point of anticipatory planning, it's possible to use building codes, for instance, going forward, to have levels of standards that can address air pollution going forward. However, more likely in dealing with a continuing and present problem is plus incentivize change. For example, to use alternative fuels. So how do you get somebody to abandon or to minimize the use of charcoal and use an alternative fuel like bioethanol? A lot of people complain that it's very slow in cooking, but it has got benefits. Or other alternative fuels, even where electricity is not more. So what kind of incentives do you have that fiscal incentives? There could be other sorts of incentives. There is, I have seen, for instance, in the past, the use of, actually not in the past, currently I have seen the use of microgrids, where this, I've not seen it in other areas, I've seen it more in rural areas, where they set up solar microgrids that provide power supply and try to migrate people from using biomass and from using petroleum-based energy sources for lighting and cooking. And in transport sector, we've seen incentivization of people adopting, especially the two-wheelers, because it makes financial sense and you address range anxiety. People will adopt this, for example, or somebody will get an e-bike instead of using a petroleum engine or such. So I think enablers of various kinds, and it's possible to research into that to see what kind of enablers those are. And you know, of course, municipalities may have limited ability to grant these enablers, and so they may have to work together with superior level governments here, secure the enablers, whether nationally or in the case here provincially, because sometimes it may be beyond their power. But to conclude, I think that indoor air pollution surpasses being an energy problem. It is also an urban governance problem of, in many ways, that needs more tools, and because it includes how people build, how people cook, how people travel, and in fact, as a consequence, what people breathe in. And so that's why I think it requires a little bit of that. And I like the question a lot, and maybe Prof Oliver should have a student write a master's thesis on that specific question down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Well, here in South Africa, we also have national plans. One I can think of is the energy efficiency, demand management side, and a lot of municipalities here in South Africa have been improving, reducing their municipal buildings, transitioning their street lights to LED lights. Yeah, we also have them. Well, that completes our first round of questions. Now I'm going to open the floor for our second session. So please pose your questions. If you're online, raise your hand or type them in the chat box. Thank you. Prof has a question.
Yes, thanks. The question that I specifically wanted to ask relates to the discussion which Prof Kibugi has had before, as to whether there is a clear legal mandate in legislation or the constitution to local governments in Kenya to respond to air pollution. What is expected of them in terms of the law, or is it voluntary?
So the hierarchy in terms of division of functions is that policy and regulatory tools would be nationally set for local government entities. Mm-hmm. And once it is set, then the mandate is established for them to implement, and therefore it's not optional. What I found, though, is that the primary intergovernmental transfer of funds is what we call equitable share, and often that is barely ever adequate. And so what has come out is that the use of conditional grants is very, very key. So, for example, as she mentioned, we're currently in a system around municipalities, which are now emerging as a strong third level. We have conditional grants for replacement of street lights. Initially with LED, now with solar completely, street lights. But I haven't seen yet any concerted effort at that level with air pollution. But I know from a policy perspective, they're just concluding a national strategy on electric cooking and alternative fuels for cooking. And so we might begin to see that also evolving. But there is, in terms of legal mandate, we don't really have a choice. Yes.
Okay, we do have a second question in the chat. Thank you, Prof Kibugi and Dr. Wesch, for your presentation. My name is Dr. Ngitai Zangaza. My question is directed to Prof. In Kenya's experience with cases like Save Lamu, how can litigation be used to address the shared roots of climate change and pollution, both of which disproportionately harm vulnerable communities through a rights-based framework rather than isolated environmental regulation? Thank you. And then, Viandra, you can pose your question.
Thank you so much, Chair. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wesch and Dr. Kibugi, for your presentations. It was really insightful. I want to ask, I'm at a point in my research where I'm coming across a lot of opinions on nature-based solutions. So I want to know, is there any nature-based solutions that you guys can maybe implement to tackle the equality? And I'm not talking about just planting trees. That's a little juvenile at this point. Is there anything else that you guys can recommend? Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca, for the question. I will now give our speaker a chance to answer the question. I will first hand over to Dr. Niké Wesch to answer the question from Bianca, and then we'll move on to Prof. Kibugi. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have just a moment to think about your question for a moment more, because there definitely is nature-based solutions options. I just have to remember which ones.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Wesch. I don't know if Prof. Kibugi, you are ready to answer the question from the
Yes, yes, I am. Good to see you, Wendy, remotely. Hope I get to see you during my stay here after some years. The question around the use of litigation to deal with pollution and disproportionate impact on vulnerable communities, I think there are two ways in that respect. And I think one is the very existence of a democratic setting where the concept of local standard and just access to court is there and it's respected. And the second one is from a normative perspective, the presence of enabling legal principles that can guide tribunals or a court of law in making the proper interpretation, and as well as pathways for appealing. And third one, which is one where we often struggle, is the impact and observance of decisions, local decisions of courts and tribunals that are actually being implemented, because you can get judgments you actually don't have. And maybe I begin from behind. I think one of the challenges that we have seen in Kenya is a continuous conveyor belt of judgments coming from the National Environment Tribunal, coming from the Environment limited in terms of implementation. And about a month ago, the Court of Appeal, which is the second last court in the hearing, upheld a decision concerning the failure to observe zoning rules by the city government of Nairobi from the Environment Code. And besides just upholding the decision, then issued a structural interdict where the court is not found as official after the conclusion of the matter, but the court then has reserved a period of 6 to 12 months to supervise the county government, the city government, in terms of compliance with the decision has. And this is important because there has previously been continuous overturning by superior courts of appeal of structural interdicts. They have consistently held that once a court issues a judgment, a trial court, then it's found as official. So this is an awakening by the courts recognizing the environment that they are operating in, where diminishing value of the rule on observance of the rule of law is quite key. So I think that's one particular important one. And then I think another key aspect, of course, is the scientific basis for vulnerable communities to do this. And one of them is the utility of environmental assessment tools. This is especially strategic environmental as well as environmental impact assessment tools, because in that process, one where the science is in place, but also where the opportunity for meaningful public consultation is in place. And environmental assessment in Kenya originated from the Constitution, which requires them as part of the areas to enhance the human right to a clean and healthy environment. And what actually made the Lamu case that Wendy refers to successful was that they found that the National Environment Authority had been in as well as in violation of the public consultation requirements, had failed to implement a mandatory requirement in the Climate Change Act, which is that in every situation where they are approving there is environmental assessment, there must be a climate risk and vulnerability assessment. So since then, and I was looking at this a few days ago, there is an increasing number of judgments that have been declared environmental assessments to be unlawful because they have not complied with the climate risk assessments that are mandatory by law. And whereas the statute actually talks about this assessment from a resilience perspective, judicial interpretation has widened the scope a lot more. So I think it's both procedural enablers, but also normative and substantive enablers that are important. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Kibugi. I'm now going to read the question from Ms. Lidilesi. It's for Dr. Wesch, and then when answering, she's answer the first question and then the question from the question from Lidile. Thank you to both Dr. Wesch and Prof. Kibugi for your very rich and engaging presentation. I have a question for Dr. Wesch, and my question is, in your research or case study which you conducted, did you find that communities were aware of the psychological or emotional, in brackets, mental effects or physical effects of living in polluted environments, or were these impacts less recognized? Thank you, Lidile, for the question. I am now going to pass over to Dr. Wesch. Thank you.
Thanks. So in terms of the nature-based solution question in these low-income areas, well, I think trees is definitely a very important factor. Also, if you think about fruit trees, that has multiple benefits, air quality, food security, maybe not food security, but at least access to some fresh fruit. Which also helps children specifically in terms of their education. So it's just these multiple effects. But a big problem in these areas is also the barrenness, which creates a lot of dust, which definitely has a large impact on air quality. So that then is land cover. Maybe not just trees, but plants in general to cover these dusty areas. That also has then an impact on climate impacts. So because these plants capture the water, etc. So just in general, I think planting plants in general, trees and other plants. I've recently done a very short literature search. I wouldn't say it's already a literature review but on nature-based solutions in informal or low-income areas. And they do talk about green roofs and green walls as possible solutions. But I'm not really convinced that that makes sense, since you need a very specific structure to hold these types of interventions. So I don't think there's a lot of research actually on nature-based solutions within informal settlements specifically. So if you think about shacks. But I think land cover, when we think about nature-based solutions within these areas, I think it should be affordable and doable by the community themselves, because I think that is just a way of now I forgot the word, giving power back to the community themselves. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. And then to the question in the chat. So not specifically only in the Metsimaholo study, but we've done similar studies in different places. And most of the time, air quality does not come up at all when you just ask about problems in general. And then when you ask about air quality without really mentioning or explaining the meaning, so you would maybe talk about the air that you breathe. People usually talk about smells. So they would sometimes then refer to smells from sewage, or the smell from a power plant or something that yeah, so it would usually be about smell. It won't really, they would it's more of the discomfort in terms of you can't sit outside because of the smell or things like that. I've never come across the emotional or mental effects that this polluted areas have. They would sometimes talk about the coughing, but in general, that's not actually on a priority list of issues. So if you just talk about issues in general, they would talk about economic opportunities, things like that. And I remember one quote that stuck with me was that you can't, so we barely survive as is. So this is not a now problem, I want to say. It's there's some more urgent matters. So air quality is not really something that they think about in general.
Thank you, Dr. Wesch. I don't know if you have time, but thank you for the answers. Well, we are now going to move to the third round of questions. We have time. Well, I'm going to pose the first question to Prof Kibugi. Prof Kibugi, you mentioned that now in Nairobi, you are looking to transition your street lights to solar. Well, South Africa is still aspiring to transition to LEDs. Can you say that South Africa is behind on its development? Should we now look to transition to having our street lights operate on solar instead of still aspiring for LEDs? Thank you. And then if there are any questions, please raise your hand online. I don't know if we have any questions on the floor. Prof has a question.
Thanks very much. I have been thinking about the presentation that the professor gave. I found it very interesting, and it seems to me like the focus of the experiment at the Metsimaholo was on improving the cooking devices, stoves that are used, and not really trying to nudge them to and to reduce reliance on direct sources of energy. I don't know if I got that correctly. And if that is the case, do you have any other project where you follow up and try to not towards moving towards the cleaner sources of energy?
Thank you, Prof, for the question. Do we have any more questions? If not, I'm going to pose one more to Prof Kibugi. Well, Prof Kibugi, you mentioned that Nairobi is actually aspiring to, they're aspiring to project the reduction of emissions by 2027 in their transport sector. Do you think that they are being too ambitious or they are actually going to meet this target? And what would your recommendations be in like quicker ways to meet this target? I thank you. I don't know if you have more questions. I can take one more question. Oh, we have one more question on the floor.
I don't know if it's more or less an unintelligent question, but there was a video going around. I think it's like the South Africa in Brazil, where people used bottles, like 2-liter Coke bottles. They threw the water in like a white substance. I'm assuming it's like something. And then they used it, they cut a hole in their shack and they put it inside. And then it provides light when there's no power. Right? So that's a different form of energy for water and which I'm assuming it doesn't release emissions. And that's a very rudimentary or efficient way of reducing your energy or carbon footprint. Do we perhaps see these kinds of developments that are in our township areas? Because we usually refer to like green energy, but those things are kind of expensive and people don't always have access to them. Is there some example of these kinds of energy saving methods that people developed that they can use that doesn't emit as much emissions within communities? That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Dietrich, for the question. Well, I am now going to hand over to Prof Kibugi to answer the questions, and then I am going to hand over to Dr. Wesch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, starting with the last question on the use of water bottles, light refraction using basic science in primary school that we had. I have seen it at some point or other presented as an innovation in informal settlements, especially where the construction is high density and there's hardly any natural airflow. And so what we would do was pass on the big bottles from the roof to allow sunlight and provide some form of natural lighting. But I couldn't speak of how effective that is as a lighting in the darkness, because then the natural light that produces that effect is not present at night, for example. But I have seen it used as a way to enhance light during the day when places that are quite dark because of the congestion. However, in informal settlements, what I have seen apply as an alternative is the use of extremely micro solar lighting systems. That is essentially a solar panel, a set of cables, and a single bulb. That is essentially, if it's a single room, there is a solar panel at the roof, a very basic cable, and a single bulb, and that's all it does. It provides lighting. And it has got a battery. Then there were just lead acid batteries, not lithium-ion batteries. And there would be enough to store adequate light for about perhaps 8 hours or so. I've seen that. It's not the most effective and not the most appealing in terms of quality of life, but I have seen them used and they are helpful in situations where the cost of living is already putting a lot of pressure in that. And some years ago, there was an effort by the government to replace the old incandescent lighting bulbs with LED. I think with LED, before LED, there was another type. And I remember there was providing that opportunity going on in that sense. With respect to solar street light, I mean, I think maybe with the exception of the heavy winters here in South Africa, and that might be more in the south, but I don't know. It depends on how technically speaking, it depends on how the element of solar radiation levels are across the country, because my country is on the equator, so it's got some much higher suitability for solar, including during the cold season. So, for example, it would work for solar lighting, but maybe not for water heating. So it depends on that, but I would assume it's not 100% impossible here. So it possibly could also be a question of policy privatization, but I think it is also being pursued in my country because it's also going to help to lower the pressure on the power grid, because streetlights consume quite a bit of that. There has been complaints that, especially on major highways, that a type of solar lighting they have used at some point haven't provided adequate illumination. So they're looking into that to see what could be the problem. But I have seen it work quite well, and lately there is even floodlights with up to 200 watts that can last up to 12 hours. I think we charge after charging for 8 to 12 hours. So it is quite possible to do that. And I think for municipalities, it also lowers costs. It's being done in metropolitan and Nairobi area. It's being done as part of a foundation grant. So I think that's what is making it doable. And in terms of emission reduction, my apology, the reduction is nationwide. It's not just the city. And it's across the transportation spectrum, not just road transportation. So it's across various forms of transportation. Is it achievable? I think in the medium term, probably not achievable because it's the highest, based on studies that were done very recently, the highest uptake for electric vehicles is actually the 2 and 3 wheelers. The standard vehicles will take a minute because we do not have a very strong manufacturing base. And it's very expensive to import fully built units across the board. However, there is, so that is a big limitation in that respect that happens. However, the opportunity would be the adoption of electric buses that are high volume and are electric for public vehicle transportation. And the reason is quite basic. The power grid in the country is now 98% renewable. But the reason, of course, is because the biggest consumers, industrial consumers like steel and cement manufacturing, are not using electricity from the power grid. They are using coal and that. But which means that during the day, the country prioritizes solar and wind, and at night it prioritizes geothermal and hydropower. So if you then have got transportation, public transportation systems that are using electricity, then that might help to get there. And then the double benefit of both ambient air quality and pollution. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Nairobi is more advanced. I will get there too. Well, I will now pass over to Dr. Wesch, but before I do, I will read one question from the chat so that she answers both of them. One question was from Prof, and then this one is from Dr. Adema. Dr. Adema says that considering the findings of the deadly air judgment, do you think South Africa has made sufficient progress in transitioning its energy to improve air quality in the high health priority area? Over to you, Dr. Wesch.
Thanks. So, Prof, I'm not sure if I heard your question correctly, but as I heard it, the network was a bit bad on my side. But it seemed like you asked if we want to follow up, or if we are planning to follow up our study to not just look at an alternative to improve the air quality, but to transition to a cleaner energy. So at the moment, that is not really our focus. As I said, I think this problem should be, or has to be looked at from various perspectives. What can be done in the interim while we are transitioning, and then also the longer term ideal of a transition to cleaner energy. So our focus at the moment is this idea of cleaner energy, and to achieve justice through this process, and to not exclude the most vulnerable who does not have access at the moment to these cleaner options. And then I think that also links to the second question about the deadly air judgment. So I think this is the whole idea, and the whole problem of air quality is so complex. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the idea of wicked problems, but air quality was that was the first wicked problem, or the first paper on wicked problems was using air quality as an example. Because there's so many different aspects, and you're trying to solve something on the one side, and then you trigger a whole different problem on the other side. So I think it is really complex, and sufficient progress in this transitioning, I think is also it's a very complex question. So South Africa has so many layers. So if we say South Africa, what do we mean in terms of legislation? But then legislation also has a lot of layers. So I mean, in this deadly air judgment, they went back to the Constitution and said what the Constitution said: we have rights. If I understand this judgment correctly. I'm not a lawyer, and I know I'm in a room full of lawyers, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But if we go to the Constitution, then it says we have this right, and then we have a lot of really nice legislation like Namakwa, and it says we should have AQMPs. We are actually looking at we're doing a small study now on the efficiency of the AQMPs, the air quality management plans. So, I mean, all of this is in place, but then if we look at, so maybe this is the South African landscape or legislative landscape, but if we look at the reality, we don't have air quality officers in each municipality. There's not enough capacity from the municipality side. So there, I think is definitely a lack, and maybe not sufficient progress, because I mean, Namakwa has been around for, I think it's 2004, so it's quite a few years. But then also I want to get back to, and I'm not sure if I talked about that in depth during my presentation, but this idea that we are focusing almost solely on the industries, and they have to pay the fines, they have to implement the cleaner technology, which is great. but we are almost completely neglecting this other source of major air pollution, and this is the fossil fuel burning. So I think in that sense, by neglecting that and almost turning a blind eye, I think we have not made sufficient progress. And I mean, there's a lot of backlash and pushback towards this this idea of offsets, for example. But this might give us a real opportunity to address this side of things, because as I just mentioned, municipalities and local government is already stretched and low on capacity in terms of human resources and finances, especially on the environmental side. So this gives us an opportunity to address this as well. But yeah, it's complex.
Thank you, Dr. Wesch, for the answers. Well, this brings us to the end of our Q&A session. If you have more questions, please do email them to Ms. Mahmoud. She's going to forward them to our class. Well, Dr. Wesch and Prof Kibugi, thank you. It was an insightful. It was insightful presentations, and I really enjoyed the Q&A session. I've learned a lot, and I'm glad that Prof Kibugi is here. I'm still going to ask a lot of questions. Well, with the power vested in me, I am now going to end the session. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Manguleni.
Thank you, Ms. Mahlangu, for facilitating a very engaging Q&A session. I don't know if our speakers have any final inputs that they'll just like to, put across to our attendants. Any final inputs? Dr. Wesch and Prof Kibugi?
I don't have any. I think this last question summed it up. I really believe that air quality and the problem of air quality is very complex, and it truly is a wicked problem. And as I ended my presentation with as well, I think because of this wickedness, we need holistic solutions. We need to look at it from all angles and have interdisciplinary teams to try and address this issue. But thank you so much also for an insightful and really nice conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Wesch. Prof Kibugi?
Well, thank you very much. I would concur with Dr. Wesch that the question of air quality and pollution, both outdoors and indoors, is one that is quite complex and needs to continue having attention of researchers, policymakers, and the public, because there is need for both integrated to be addressed in an integrated manner across facets of public administration, because public administration by very nature is very sectoral, but that's often sometimes the undoing. But also now to enhance evidence-driven policy making and lawmaking, I think it is useful to look at an interdisciplinary approach to this. And for example, this afternoon, we've had the results of scientific inquiry, but there are also quite a number of governance and procedural interventions that matter. So I think that kind of interdisciplinarity is quite useful in informing both research processes and therefore having more wholesome outcomes. But also in terms of how and what kind of outputs go to inform policy change down the road. And thank you very much for having me. I have also learned quite a lot and have enjoyed the engagement, and I look forward to even more. I can see that Ms. Mahlangu has promised a a lot more heavier questions in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this rich and thought-provoking conversation. And I would like to especially extend my heartfelt thanks to our guest speakers for their insightful contributions, and to all our attendants for engaging so thoughtfully. And yeah, it was such a robust discussion. Today's discussion has reminded us that air quality is not simply a technical or environmental concern. It is a profound matter of social justice. The air we breathe reflects the inequalities in our cities and communities, and it tells a story of those who live near polluting industries, and distinguish between who can afford cleaner energy and who cannot, and whose health and livelihoods are most at risk. We've also learned quite a lot from the Kenyan experience about the strides being made in innovation and core benefits, from the adoption of electric vehicles, solar energy, to climate finance initiatives that deliver health and well-being dividends. These examples remind us that solutions to air pollution can also advance equity, sustainability, and economic opportunity. May today's dialogue continue to inspire collaborative and justice-oriented action towards cleaner air and healthier, climate-resilient communities across South Africa and our broader region. Thank you all very much, and please do join us again next year.